Imagine you are sitting in a courtroom. You're facing serious criminal charges, and the prosecution has just finished laying out their case.
Right.
They point directly at you, claiming your actions caused this, severe widespread chaos in society. Now it is your turn to mount a defense. You step up, but instead of calling a high-powered lawyer to the stand or presenting some surprise alibi witness, you roll out a whiteboard.
A whiteboard in a criminal
Yeah,
trial.
exactly. You start drawing diagrams. You call upon the laws of statistical mechanics, complex network topology, and the mathematics of probability to prove your innocence. You don't argue the law, you argue the physics.
It genuinely sounds like the climax of a hard science fiction novel. I mean, right. But this is a very real, incredibly sophisticated legal defense strategy that we are analyzing today.
It really is.
And it fundamentally questions how we define cause and effect in the digital age.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a highly unusual stack of source material in front of us. We are looking at analytical reports generated by several of the world's leading AI models, specifically ChatGPT, Copilot, DeepSeek, Gemini, Grok, and Quinn.
That's quite the lineup.
Yeah, and these AIs were all tasked with analyzing a single extraordinary document, the blood letter of self-defense and accusation from prison, written by a man named Dr. Chen Jingyuan.
And our mission for this deep dive is to explore this fascinating collision. We're looking at what happens when hard, quantifiable network science crashes headfirst into, well, subjective legal judgments.
Right.
We're going to unpack exactly how complex systems theory can be weaponized as a legal defense to completely dismantle a criminal charge.
But wait, before we begin, it is important to note that our sources today involve politically charged content, specifically a citizen's imprisonment by state authorities over social media posts. We want to make it absolutely clear to you that we are not taking any sides, nor are we endorsing the viewpoints of the original author or the state. Our role today is strictly impartial. We are simply here to report on and explore the fascinating scientific and legal ideas contained within these source documents.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. To start, where do we even begin with this case?
Well, to understand the sheer brilliance of this defense, we first have to understand the physical battlefield where this alleged crime took place.
Okay, the battlefield.
Right. In this case, that battlefield is the social media network itself.
Yeah.
Dr. Chen was charged with a crime often translated as picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
Which sounds pretty broad, honestly.
It is. The core accusation was that by retweeting certain posts on a platform like Twitter or Weibo, he caused severe disorder in public order.
Ah, okay. So the legal framework is operating on a very old school linear track there. It basically says, you clicked retweet, and that physical action directly created a measurable state of chaos. A causes B.
Exactly.
It's the same logic as throwing a rock through a window. I mean, the rock causes the shatter.
Yeah, and Dr. Chen's very first defensive maneuver is to completely dismantle that premise. He doesn't deny clicking retweet. Instead, he uses something called the CAP theorem to prove that the chaos the prosecution is pointing to isn't a crime.
Wait, if it's not a crime, what is it?
It is the fundamental physical reality of the environment itself. The CAP theorem comes from the world of distributed computer systems. It was proposed by a computer scientist, Eric Brewer. CAP stands for consistency, availability, and partition tolerance.
Okay, I've heard of this in relation to databases, but how does he apply it to a social media feed?
Well, the theorem mathematically proves that in any vast distributed system, which a global social media network undeniably is, you cannot have all three of those properties at the same time. You are mathematically forced to sacrifice one.
So you have to pick two.
Exactly. Because you have servers and users distributed all over the globe, communicating over physical fiber optic cables and cell towers, you will always have some network delays, dropped packets, or partitions. That is the p-partition tolerance.
Right, because wires break, Wi-Fi drops, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't avoid it, so system architects are forced to choose between C and A.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this. So C is consistency. That would mean every single user on the platform sees the exact same data, the exact same replies, at the exact same millisecond.
Correct. But to achieve perfect consistency across a global network, the system would have to constantly freeze.
Oh, wow.
Every time someone posted, the system would have to lock every other user out for a fraction of a second while it updated every server on Earth simultaneously, just to ensure no one saw outdated information.
Which would be an absolute nightmare for a platform like Twitter. You'd be staring at a loading screen all day.
Exactly. So they choose A, availability.
Yeah.
They want you scrolling, clicking, and seeing ads, even if your feed is slightly out of sync with your neighbor's feed. That is the trade-off. Social media platforms fundamentally prioritize availability over consistency.
Okay, it's like hosting a massive, bustling party in a mansion. You can't expect every single person in every room to be having the exact same synchronized
Oh,
conversation. That would be perfect consistency. The only way to achieve that would be to constantly stop the music, lock the doors, and shout instructions through megaphone, which completely destroys the availability and flow of the party.
that's a great analogy.
So you let people mingle. The resulting noise, the overlapping conversations, the slight confusion, that isn't a riot breaking out. It's just the sound of the party. It is the natural built-in state of that specific environment.
What's fascinating here is how Dr. Chen takes a legal accusation
Hmm.
to cause severe disorder and reframes it as a fundamental misunderstanding of network ontology.
Ontology, like the nature of its being.
Exactly. He is telling the court that disorder or inconsistency isn't a crime he committed. By demanding that the digital network be perfectly orderly and consistent, the prosecution is demanding a mathematical impossibility. You cannot blame a single drop of water for the ocean being wet. The system is noisy by design.
That sets up a brilliant defensive baseline. I mean, the system is naturally chaotic. But if the baseline is chaos, how does the prosecution point a finger at one specific user and say, their specific noise caused structural damage?
Right.
Because if I drop a boulder into the ocean, I do create a measurable wave. If Dr. Chen clicked retweet, doesn't he create a wave?
To answer that, Dr. Chen transitions from computer science to complex network theory. He brings in the Bourbaki-Albert model.
Okay.
The AI models analyzing his letter all highlight this as the linchpin of his structural defense. The Bourbaki-Albert model describes what physicists call scale-free networks. We tend to imagine social networks like a uniform grid or a mesh where everyone is connected to roughly the same number of people.
Like a checkerboard.
But empirical observation shows social media doesn't look like a checkerboard at all. It follows a power law distribution. Because of a dynamic called preferential attachment, basically, the rich get richer, and popular accounts attract new followers faster than unknown accounts, the network topology heavily skews.
Ah, I see.
You end up with a very tiny number of massive hub nodes. Think celebrities, state media accounts, or massive influencers who have millions of connections. And then you have millions and millions of edge nodes. These are ordinary users with very few connections.
And according to the documents, Dr. Chen had under 100 followers. To make it even less impactful, the documents note that most of those were inactive, what you'd call zombie accounts. He is the quintessential edge node.
He is out on the absolute furthest, thinnest, most isolated branch of that entire network structure. And this physical reality brings us to Cohen's critical threshold formula, developed by physicists Reuven Cohen and Shlomo Havlin.
Okay, what does that formula do?
They studied how these scale-free networks respond to damage or disruption. And their formula mechanically proves that scale-free networks possess extreme robustness to random failures.
Meaning they don't break easily, but why don't they break? If you start knocking out nodes, shouldn't the network fragment?
Well, it depends entirely on which nodes you knock out. Because the vast majority of nodes are edge nodes, Cohen's formula shows you could randomly wipe out an enormous percentage of them, say 80 or 90%, and the macro structure of the network wouldn't even link.
Wow.
The core communication pathways remain entirely intact.
Let me try to map that onto the physical world. It's like the national highway system. The
Mhm.
hub nodes are the massive interstate highways connecting major cities. The edge nodes are tiny dirt roads ending in cul-de-sacs in rural towns.
Exactly.
If you close a dirt road in a rural town, cross-country freight traffic doesn't even notice. The flow of goods continues uninterrupted.
That translates perfectly. Because Dr. Chen is a dirt road in this topology, mathematically, if you deleted his account, or a million accounts just like his, the structural integrity of the network remains over 99% intact.
Incredible.
His actions simply do not possess the structural weight to impact the flow of the network. The math proves his insignificance to the overall architecture.
Okay, the structural argument makes perfect sense. He didn't break the highway. But I can hear the prosecution pushing back here. What about the chain reaction? We've all heard variations of chaos theory, the idea that a tiny spark can burn down an entire forest under the right conditions. I mean, the butterfly effect?
Yes, the famous butterfly.
Even if he's just an edge node, couldn't his one retweet have sparked a cascade that eventually reached a hub node and caused chaos? Doesn't every tiny action have the potential to ripple outwards?
Dr. Chen anticipates that exact counterargument. He knows the prosecution will try to claim his small action triggered a massive reaction. To dismantle this, he relies on the theory of self-organized criticality, or SOC, and applies the Galton-Watson extinction theorem.
Those are heavy terms. Walk us through how they dismantle the tiny spark, massive fire argument.
Let's start with the spark and the fire. For a spark to burn down a forest, the forest has to be completely dried out, covered in dead brush, with high winds, what physicists call a supercritical state.
Okay, so highly flammable.
Exactly. The system has to be on a razor's edge of instability. If a system is supercritical, yes, a tiny input can create a massive output. But information spread on social media isn't a magical, guaranteed chain reaction. It is mathematically modeled as a branching process.
A branching process. So one person shares it to three people, and each of them shares it to three people.
That is the idea. But the crucial metric determining if that actually happens is the branching parameter, represented by the mathematical letter m. This parameter represents the average number of new people who successfully share a piece of information after being exposed to it by a single node.
Okay, so the M is basically the reproduction rate of the retweet.
Precisely. If m is greater than 1, the system is supercritical. The information goes viral because every generation of sharing is larger than the last.
Right, like if one person shares it and on average 1.5 people share it from them, it grows exponentially.
Yes. If m equals 1, the spread is critical. It maintains a steady pulse. But if m is less than 1, the spread is mathematically guaranteed to shrink and die out.
Let me think about that, because if M is, say, 0.5, it means it takes two people seeing it for one person to share it. So the first generation has 100 people, the next has 50, then 25. It literally collapses in on itself.
And this is where Dr. Chen lands his theoretical knockout punch. He is an edge node with under 100 mostly inactive followers. His branching parameter, his m, isn't just less than 1, it is vastly less than 1.
Wow.
He is operating in what physicists term the deep subcritical zone. This brings in the Galton-Watson extinction theorem, a foundational concept in probability theory. The theorem states that if a branching process originates in the deep subcritical zone, where billion is much, much less than 1, the probability of that cascade going extinct, meaning it stops, completely approaches 1.
Wait, extinction probability approaching 1 means it is a 100% mathematical certainty that the retweet dies out almost instantly.
Yes. For his retweet to have caused the severe disorder the prosecution claims, they would have to scientifically prove two nearly impossible things. First, that the entire social media platform was already in an extraordinarily rare, hypersensitive, supercritical state at that exact moment.
Which is unlikely.
Right. And second, that his specific retweet was the necessary catalyst that tipped the entire system over the edge. By demonstrating he lived in the deep subcritical zone, he proves he physically did not possess the capacity to trigger a cascade. The math dictates he couldn't have started the fire because he was standing in a damp cave, not a dry forest.
That is a staggering defense. I mean, he isn't standing in front of the judge saying, I didn't mean to do it. He is saying the laws of probability and statistical mechanics dictate that I could not have done it.
Exactly.
So when we feed this physicist's defense into these advanced language models, what is the verdict? How do the AIs evaluate this collision of science and the gavel?
The AI consensus is remarkably unified and incredibly supportive of his logic. ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, they all agree that Dr. Chen's application of the science is theoretically flawless.
Flawless. That's a strong word for an AI to use.
It is. By proving his M parameter was less than 1, he completely destroys the legal requirement of causality. The prosecution simply cannot prove his action caused the massive resulting disorder. Furthermore, the AIs point out that this defense also completely dismantles the requirement of subjective intent.
Because to be found guilty of a crime like this, you generally have to intend to cause the chaos, or at least be recklessly aware that your actions might cause it.
And the AIs reason that because Dr. Chen is a scientist who deeply understands these network physics, he knew with absolute mathematical certainty that his actions wouldn't cause a ripple. When you know your actions are physically incapable of causing harm, it is logically impossible for you to possess malicious intent.
That makes perfect sense.
He was just breathing in the digital atmosphere, knowing his single breath wouldn't cause a hurricane.
Okay, the math is bulletproof, the logic is sound. But if I am a judge sitting on a bench, I don't care about Cohen's formula or branching parameters. I care about the penal code.
Right.
Did the AI models address how you bridge that massive gap between statistical mechanics and the written law?
They absolutely did, and they all identified this as the fatal flaw in his strategy. It is a massive translation gap. The AIs highlight that courts simply do not run on statistical mechanics.
Obviously not.
Judges do not speak the language of subcritical zones or scale-free network topology. They speak the language of legal statutes and precedents. The models observe that bringing the Galton-Watson theorem to a criminal trial is ineffective because the legal system is structurally incapable of processing probabilistic arguments in place of linear facts.
You know, the AIs actually advised translating this physics into legal terminology. Instead of standing up and saying, my branching parameter is less than 1, the AI suggests saying my actions lacked realistic danger.
Much better phrasing for a court.
Right. Even better, they suggested tying it to specific observable legal thresholds. The source documents mentioned there are actual judicial interpretations requiring a post to hit a certain metric like 500 retweets or 5,000 views to trigger criminal liability for this specific charge.
The AI models concluded that proving his posts never hit that 500 retweet threshold would be infinitely more persuasive to a judge than explaining the CAP theorem. The legal system operates on observable linear thresholds, not the probabilities of network dynamics.
And this brings us to what might be the most incredible detail in the entire stack of sources. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this part is wild.
Dr. Chen didn't just leave it at theory. There is a postscript, an update, from after he was eventually released from prison. He actually went back onto the platform and checked the exact tweets that got him jailed.
Yeah.
They hadn't been deleted by the censors. They were still up. And they still had 0 engagement, no likes, no retweets, no comments.
It is a stunning piece of physical evidence.
It is an empirical mic drop. I mean, think about what that 0 engagement means in the context of the math we just discussed. That 0 is the real-world manifestation of his branching parameter, his MAM, being less than 1.
Exactly.
He transitioned his defense from theoretical physics to a physical control group. He is basically saying to the authorities, look, if my post caused severe societal disorder, where is the data? Where is the traffic?
Right.
He proved that the severe disorder they charged him with never actually existed in the physical world. It only existed in the text of the legal indictment. It was a phantom.
That post-release observation validates every single thing he argued theoretically. The deep subcritical zone wasn't just a math equation he scrawled on a whiteboard. It was the observable, measurable reality of his digital footprint. The Galton-Watson theorem played out exactly as predicted. The cascade went extinct immediately.
So this forces us to address a very uncomfortable reality. If the edge nodes, the ordinary citizens with a few followers, are mathematically incapable of causing the system to collapse, who or what actually threatens the network? Because we all know social media and society at large can be volatile.
That is where the philosophical analysis provided by models like DeepSeek and Gemini really shines, and it turns the entire indictment on its head.
How so?
Well, we established earlier that scale-free networks are extremely robust to random failures at the edge. But, according to network science, these same topologies have a critical weakness. They are highly vulnerable to targeted attacks on their hub nodes.
Oh, right. The massive accounts, the central pillars of the network. If you take out the interstates, traffic actually does grind to a halt.
The AIs make a profound analytical leap here. They argue that within the architecture of a society, the judicial authorities and state apparatus themselves act as the ultimate hub nodes. They are the central pillars maintaining social order, trust, and the flow of reliable information.
Oh, I see where this is going.
By framing citizens, by misapplying the law, and by acting lawlessly to imprison a man for a math equation, it is the authorities themselves who are injecting what the AIs call legal entropy into the system.
Legal entropy.
Yes. When a hub node begins to act erratically or destructively, that behavior genuinely threatens the entire network structure. By generating wrongful convictions, they are accumulating potential energy, pushing the entire social system closer to a catastrophic, supercritical state.
So the authorities are pointing at a speck of dust on the very edge of the network, screaming, "You're causing an earthquake," while they themselves are taking a jackhammer to the foundation of the building.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That is a stunning reversal of the narrative. The state is the one creating the disorder.
It is a powerful conclusion. And it is why DeepSeek suggests that Dr. Chen's blood letter shouldn't just be viewed as a failed legal plea from an obscure court case. It should be preserved as a time capsule for future digital archaeologists.
A time capsule. It really is a snapshot of an era.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this case becomes a perfect historical sample of a fundamental friction defining our modern world. It captures the exact moment when the 19th century linear thinking of a legal system, the belief that A definitively causes B, collides head-on with the 21st century nonlinear reality of digital networks, where causality is distributed, probabilistic, and deeply complex.
It is a document of a system trying to govern a complex network using a ruler and a magnifying glass.
Exactly.
Let's recap this fascinating journey we've been on today. We started with the CAP theorem, which proves that in any massive distributed network, absolute order is a mathematical impossibility. Inconsistency is just the constant background noise of the party. Then we looked at scale-free networks and Cohen's formula, proving that deleting an edge node doesn't break the system's structural integrity. We moved to the Galton-Watson theorem, mathematically guaranteeing that because Dr. Chen lived in a deep subcritical zone, his actions would die out instantly.
And it did.
And finally, we saw the stark divide between physical truth proven by those zero engagement tweets and the archaic linear language of the law.
It serves as a stark reminder of how dangerously disconnected legal narratives can become from physical reality when they refuse to acknowledge the science of the environment they're trying to police.
So, what does this all mean for you, listening right now? You will probably never find yourself needing to defend your freedom using network topologies or branching parameters in a courtroom. But understanding that we live in a deep subcritical zone fundamentally changes how you should view your daily digital footprint. You aren't single-handedly causing digital chaos every time you post or share a thought. The math proves your individual noise is just a drop in the ocean. But you are a node. You are a tiny, integral part of a massive, living, breathing organism. You are subject to the physics of the network, whether the law understands those physics or not.
And that leaves us with a rather urgent question to consider. If our legal systems are built on an outdated, linear understanding of cause and effect, and we now live in a hyper-complex, nonlinear digital world where causality is distributed and probabilistic, are our current laws fundamentally unequipped to govern the future?
That is the big question.
And if they are, who gets to rewrite the rules? The lawyers clinging to the linear past, or the physicists mapping the complex reality of the present?
Imagine sitting in that courtroom again. You've drawn out the math on the whiteboard, you've proven the physics, you've shown them the zero retweets, but the judge is still looking at you, expecting a simple yes or no to an impossibly complex question. It makes you wonder what happens when the gavel finally falls and the law decides to ignore gravity. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.